Hello, I am Janice B Gordon, the customer growth expert, and this is Scale Your Sales podcast. Ranked among the top sales podcasts globally for CEOs and revenue leaders and growth focused organizations. We explore how to scale predictable revenue through smarter leadership, customer excellence, and data-informed sales operations. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, my guest talks about the challenge of more pipeline myth. We talk about most revenue problems coming from the misalignment of the problem children. And this is across the entire customer journey. When marketing and sales and product and customer success all are solving slightly different customer problems or different ICPs. But what's important is to get them all aligned in the same customer journey so growth accelerates quickly. You're going to love this conversation. My next guest is a fractional CRO and GTM strategist who helps scaling startups and small medium businesses through the biggest inflection points. She's known for her strong point of view that most revenue problems aren't sales problems. They're ICP alignment problems and poopy pipeline problems. She helps companies rebuild their foundation so revenue growth can happen on purpose moving forward. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Lindsay Rios.
Thank you, Janice.
It's wonderful to have you here. And I just want to celebrate and congratulate you on the post that you created and shared on LinkedIn in celebration of International Women's Day. Oh my word. Everyone has got to go onto Lindsay's timeline and like and share. So many women and their comments. And the frightening thing is that you realize not a lot has changed.
Yeah, I know. And it started as this thing that was brewing in my head from one comment that got said to me by one of my son's friend's parents at one of the games that we were at. And I like this man. I think he's a lovely man. And he knows me. He knew that I worked. We'd talk about work before, but obviously he forgot. And he ended up, we were just talking and he just was like, "Oh, Lindsay, like, do you work?" And of course I told him. And so it's a seemingly innocuous like question, right? It's the little things that, you don't think are a big deal, but I wanted to be like, of course I work. Like, why wouldn't I work? Was kind of my initial feeling. And so I actually asked my husband later that night. Cause like before I go getting all, on my soapbox here, I was like, "Babe, can I ask you a question?" And he was like, "Okay." He's like, have you ever been asked, like, do you work? Like, do you have a job? And at first he was like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, tell me," and then, but when we broke it down, what he meant was like more like maybe when he was younger. I'm like, I don't mean when you're like a kid or a teenager where like someone's going, "Oh, do you have a part-time job or something?" I mean, like as an adult. And I gave him the scenario. And he went, "You know what? No." I'm like, right. And so it's like, because no one's going to ask a man, an adult man, if they work. They're going to assume that they have a job, if that they plan on working. They don't ever assume a man is a stay-at-home parent or just doesn't work or whatever, right? And even though I know that that man didn't mean anything by it, it was like it just really irked me, because I'm like, it's these micro moments that we as women face, whether it's being a parent, not being a parent, being married, not being married, working, not, just, and we're taught from the moment we are born in society things unintentionally, right? And so I actually asked my friend who I tag in the post, Jillian, a very good friend, her thoughts about it. And she wasn't bothered by it as much, and so she was kind of explaining her perspective. But she's like, "But I understand why you feel this way. And it just kept living in my brain for a few weeks until one day I was driving home from dropping off the kids to go start working. And I was listening to the song that I end up using, Messy, by Lola Young. And I went, I've got it. I just had this vision of, I just need a montage of just women sharing something that's happened, something that's been said to them that likely men don't get said to, asked or have that said to. Because I didn't want it to be something that was meant to just be controversial. That wasn't the point. I wanted it to be something that when you watch it, maybe you go, I think I might have said that before. Right. And I realize why that maybe isn't the best mindset to have, or to at least make women feel seen and heard,
I think what's great about it when that man didn't intentionally mean anything by it. I mean, but he didn't engage. But if he was to, I'm sure if he was to watch the video, that the incredible montage, because the same information is reflected back again and again and again, he would have an aha moment,
Yeah.
realizing the gravity in that simple little question. And that's what I think is so powerful about the video. I mean, I thought the amount of times a man has and actually this is men and women, because I
Yep.
don't have children, they question like I'm supposed to justify to them, or if I'm not married, and it may be what they think is a compliment. Oh, why is a beautiful woman like you not married?
Right.
How do you
Yeah. You
they
don't
have,
really
yeah,
in
go on,
men.
go for it.
Well, and the other thing is, it's crazy. That man has daughters. That man's wife works. So again, it's not that he thinks that women shouldn't be working. It's just, again, that expectation in society that we've all even been taught, men or women.
Yeah,
Yeah, and to your point, that's why I made sure in the video I wanted every other type of perspective that could be.
yeah.
If you are a mom and you're working, oh, well, then you're not raising your kids. And if you're a woman who doesn't want to have kids or couldn't, whatever the reason, it doesn't matter.
Mm,
It's no
mm.
business.
No,
Then why
yeah,
don't you have kids? You're not fulfilled, right? It's like that double-edged sword that we deal with, right, constantly is what I wanted to really reflect as well. So
yeah.
yeah, I remember when I got the amount of editing, that I was doing, and it was never finished. And then I finally had made a decision. I did the last edit, and I went, okay, that's it. Like, no more. And then I burst into tears.
Mm.
I think I was just holding all the weight and then all the stories and everything. And then I was just like, oh my God, like yeah, it was a big deal. So I really can't appreciate enough that a year later from me posting it, it's still making waves, and
Mm.
that you brought it up to recognize it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So I want to talk about, some of these issues in the workplace. We're in revenue, talking about leadership and the kind of cultures that we have. We still do not have equity within the revenue generating operation. And, I can pull up lots of stats about, diverse teams are more productive, the revenue increases with diverse team. Women are, they perform better in sales. The way the environment buyers want to buy is more of the feminine energy than it is the kind of hunter, numbers and all of the ridiculous words we use for clients like targets. So why isn't there more equity? Why are we still not getting it in revenue?
So you know, I think that that's such a varied answer, because if you asked different people, they'd probably have a different perspective and experience. I think across the board, we're as women, we're still just behind the eight ball on when we started having the same careers that men started, right? And you go back to where women were the ones taking care of the household or family, and the men went out and brought home the dough, right? So we didn't start doing this as early as men did. So there's just a timeline thing there, right? And then there's the oppression that was given to us about wanting to do it too. So not only were we behind the eight ball, but then we were forced back to not do it. And that still exists all the time throughout the world, period. And then, while there's a lot of people who like to say things like, let's not make gender a part of this conversation. But we have to, right? Because it's a real thing. There's real disparity because of it. I'd love to be able to talk about it not being a gender thing, but it's just a factual, thing that happens still. And I think when we bring down the qualities, like you mentioned, there's enough data out there, to your point, that can quote unquote prove why some of the things that women are naturally very good at, emotional intelligence, listening skills, relationship building versus hard selling and convincing and being aggressive or direct, right? Why we're good at that, therefore having good results. But again, I'm going to bring in that double-edged sword comment I just said a little while ago. But then also it's seen as weakness often, right? Oh, you're too emotional. Oh, you're not asking for the business enough. Oh, women aren't able to, be aggressive enough in sales. So it's just like, okay, so which should it be? Right. And so I think that's until that part kind of stops, it's like we're going to keep having this issue. And then the other huge issue is when we don't see ourselves in something growing up, we don't often tend to either think we can do it or want to do it. Right. So if we don't see women in revenue roles, revenue leadership roles, then, that's where that whole term representation matters. I certainly didn't ever have a woman, let alone a woman of color, be my sales leader ever. So sometimes we have to decide, then I'll be it, right? I'll do that to be the person that someone else can see,
Yeah.
doing that path that they want.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, let me talk more about the pipeline myth. Many CEOs respond to revenue pressure by demanding more pipeline. So why might this be the wrong question?
So one of the lessons that I learned just when I was like a really early head of sales myself, and then now been living in these stages for long enough that I want to admit, we get really caught up on thinking that growth of pipeline is like one of the best signals to health of any sort. Healthy business, product market fit, good systems, all that stuff. But the problem is that then we either create pipelines that are filled with crap, right? Filled with not real things. Or if we're able to convince customers enough to be our customer, we tend to have a lot of the issues afterwards. Lack of retention, right? Unhappy customers, cost of acquisitions, horrific, things of that nature. So I think that we get way too distracted by pipeline growth as being the right signal versus some of these other way more important metrics and signals to pay attention to in our business. And it's also, I think, a little bit of trauma, if you will, from the days of like absolute growth of all costs with early stage startups that were just being able to get millions of dollars of funding for showing growth, whether it was good growth or not. And those that lingers still, right, as a good thing when it's not.
All right, well, let's delve into that a bit more. For as you say, for years the message for startups has been grow at fast, grow at all costs. So, do you think that mindset has done more good, or are there areas where there is still some value in it? Done more harm than good, I mean. Yeah.
Right. My gut reaction is it's done more harm than good, but I do think there's always pros and cons to every lesson. I think that what I do think it showed us was it showed us how capable we really can be. I think one of the one of the wonderful things about growth at all costs was that it gave a lot of people opportunity for growth that we wouldn't have otherwise had in other types of companies. I, for one, was able to progress in my career path quickly because we were growing crazy quick, right? And so, you see maybe talent and grit and courage being rewarded much faster, maybe even easier when you had growth at all costs. When I went to a large org like HubSpot, one of the things I didn't love was because I'm like, oh, it's too big here, right? I didn't feel like I was making impact. And that's something that's really important to me as a person. So it wasn't the right fit for me. And if we all existed in companies where you worked there for 10, 20, 30 years, like we always did, then we wouldn't be able to maybe get into another role or leadership if that's our journey that we want, et cetera. So I think that that's really, why that was fun and what we could learn about ourselves. We learned how to make systems happen that could create really rapid growth too, which was again not a focus. But the skeletons that came from it, was affecting people's livelihoods a lot, where we would just grow and then we would reduce, not make it, as a company, really unhealthy expectations of what a good business should be, things of that nature.
Yeah, and it's also a different world now, isn't it?
Yeah.
That seems to have very much died in the relics of pre-pandemic. And the customers are learning and evolving all the time. So what worked then wouldn't work now. So many organizations still measure success by activity and volume of emails sent, calls made, outreach numbers. So as much as we are in evolving, Leslie, sometimes the metrics aren't.
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about why leading metrics are really, really valuable and that we really have to focus on them. But I think that the wrong leading metrics are emphasized, right? So things like email sent, calls made, all of that. There is definitely still lots of leaders and organizations that expect an insane amount of quantity of those types of activities without it actually producing the lagging KPIs that actually matter for the business. When you only focus on lagging, you don't get enough information as to what is working in the beginning and what you could actually increase or decrease to affect the lagging results. But I think part of why people focus on the activity ones is one, those are the ones that you can control. So, that's where you can actually go and tell a team of SDRs, you were making 50, I need you to make 100 now. And that's technically something that could be done because you can control it. However, if you don't have proof that going from 50 to 100 actually changes the outputs enough or at all, then you start seeing all these unhealthy things start happening between the business not being healthy and also people's literal mindsets not being healthy. So instead, I try to coach, talk about on LinkedIn, tell my clients like the leading metrics that should matter more are the ones that are still qualitative in terms of like, is the sales cycle getting longer or shorter in that part of the customer journey, right? So like how many days is it taking for a deal to be created from the first time you reached out to a prospect? Is that increasing or is that decreasing? Now, you can't control that as well by yourself, but that matters. Being able to control your sales cycle matters, not 50 to 100 dials or the conversion, right, of your open rates of emails. You can't just send 5x more emails with the same terrible open rate. So it's the wrong leading metrics that I see a lot of, being asked for, and then frustration about the results not changing.
Do you find that people don't delve deeply enough into the metrics? So you might understand where the blockages are in the pipeline, but they don't investigate that blockage and just isolate that to see what is the leading factor? What isn't working? What do they need to change? So they may know about the metrics, but they don't investigate and interrogate and start to remeasure the isolating aspect. What is having an impact on that? If I do something further upstream or downstream, do you find that? Because I certainly find that when I go into companies, people can spout lots of metrics, but when I interrogate, well, what does that mean? And what has an impact on it? Because you should be having a conversation. That should be the conversation, not actually just reading out the metrics. So what are you finding, Leslie?
Yeah, I am.
Lindsay, sorry, Leslie. I don't know why I've got Leslie in my head. Lindsay, sorry.
Not a similar name. Yeah, I do see that because, and I actually have a client that I just helped point out about which leading and lagging KPIs we should be measuring. At what point I talk about you need to have your green and red flags within your strategy, which is green flags mean we are doing the right thing. We're going to keep going because that's really hard. So I think patience is not given enough to see results, especially when we talk about outbound efforts, right? And activity efforts. People want to pivot way too fast. You should only pivot when you know that you have a red flag, right? And so to your point, like, maybe what metrics are supposed to be out there, but do you actually know yours? A lot of orgs don't. It's actually very difficult to get accurate KPIs within each part of your journey, right? They look at some of the easy ones, but this is where RevOps, just comes in as to like why it's always that thing that I see a lot of companies go like, oh yeah, we know that that's like important, but it's not the most important. I'm like, actually it is because you don't know your own data, like you're saying, and it's not accurate. So you can't go and try to make any data-driven decisions here. You can make a lot more gut-based decisions off of what you see. And to your point, every single rep, when it comes down to it in an org, has their things that they need to improve on. So you can't be like, oh, well, our team's really good at creating deals, but our win rate is really poor. I'm like, do you know how many inflection points that are from deal creation to close won that could be going on right now? And that every single rep is going to have a little bit different part that they need help with or that they're really good at, right? And so one of the things I had done in my orgs is we had the ability for them to see like what their conversion rate was at each stage of the pipeline and then comparing it to others so that we could be like, all right, well, you have a phenomenal conversion rate from, proposal sent to procurement stage, right? Someone else was like way off. So now my sales managers could actually go in and take a look at what's happening here that is preventing you from going on to a stage that ideally should be probably a 50-50 at that point, right? I don't see that happening enough in orgs. I see it way too high level or they just don't really know, right? Because they don't have the data and they're not willing to invest the money and time to get that data.
And the problem is that I find is that people then want to accelerate it. So they're going to put AI behind or some kind of automation, something. They're going to accelerate something that they really don't know if it's working or why it's working or why it may not be working.
Right. We see a lot of the return to working with outbound agencies and partners. I'm seeing so much of that. We can't figure it out or we don't have the team anymore because we don't have large sales orgs anymore a lot of times, right? We're going into less people, not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion, but then it's like, oh, but we don't have the resource. So we'll hire a quote unquote expert to do mass outbound for us so that we can just close the deals. To your point, one, if we don't already have a pipeline and a process that we know is efficient, you're trying to scale something that you can't scale. And even before all that, the other issue I see most of the time is that outbound agency will not be successful if you don't already have product or service market fit and that you really know who your ICP is, which most companies really don't. So you're going to set them up for failure. And then you're going to say they didn't work and you're going to spend a lot of money. And anyone you're starting to put in that pipeline that they can generate, You might get lucky, but most of them end up being, they go, oh, and these are like not really our ICP. Like these are really small deals, right? Compared to what we normally want to do. So I'm just seeing this. And then people now are like, oh, well, I don't need you. I'll try to use AI, like you said, and we'll do it ourselves. Same exact issues are going to happen here. So
Yeah.
root problems are being made bigger because of the scaling.
Yeah. Yeah. So what should a CEO prioritize if they were going to succeed and grow into 2026 and way beyond?
So my signal that I tell CEOs, which is my ICP, is, are the kids fighting? And if they are, then this is what we need to do. What I mean by that is, if you've got like marketing that's creating leads and sales is like, marketing's leads suck. They don't convert. We don't like them. And marketing's like, salespeople are lazy and they never reach out to all of these MQLs I keep creating. And then customer success is like, oh my God, sales just closes all the wrong people. And now all I am is a firefighter all day with unhappy customers. And then products over here just making stuff and everybody's mad at them because they're like, you don't make anything we want. So the kids are fighting. Then what's happened is everybody is focusing on a slightly different definition of your ideal customer profile. It's not usually wildly different, it's slightly. And now you cannot scale on purpose. That's my whole, thing I say, because you want to grow on purpose, not on accident. You said something very key earlier. It's not just the whole, like, we don't know how to grow, but we also don't know why things work. If you don't know those things, then you'll scale on accident until you stop. That's what tends to happen, right? And I start working with these orgs and they got to 25, they got to 30 mil, but they don't really know why. They don't really know how. It was kind of on an accident. And then it stops because it always will. And now the kids are fighting. Well, here's what we got to do. We actually have to be honest and we have to work towards who your true ideal customer profile is, the person who is the business that is healthiest for your business. Once you get to that level of scale and kind of operation and amount of people you might have, the burn that you have as a company, it's very scary to start saying no, right? So even though they all agree and I'll go in and I do this whole thing and I'm like, this is your true customer, backed by your interviews, backed by your data, all of it. And they're like, yep, you're totally right. And then they go, okay, so now we're going to rebuild this go-to-market strategy. So every department and their strategy is working towards the same definition. What that tends to mean is we're going to say no a lot now. And they're like, and they keep nodding their heads. And then we get to the part where we then start saying no. And then they're like, oh, that seems scary. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, oh, but we have to do that, right? Because now we're scaling on purpose, not whatever came our way and almost obliterated our company.
I can imagine how scary that was, and even for the CEO as well, because he's got investors, he's got all these other people. It takes quite a brave person to do that, to turn away business, and I suppose there's the calculation to understand why that business is bad for you. People generally understand the figures.
Right.
Customer success can give you the figures of how much work they need to do and why it's losing the money. So do you go that far as to do the costings, the financials around each customer segment so that people clearly understand why it's a no? So it's not so much of an emotional no, it's actually a logical no.
Right. Yeah, I do my best. Now, sometimes when you go back to what we were saying earlier, if we don't have great data, which, people might be surprised or completely unsurprised by how companies can be around for 10, 20 years or get to that level of scale and still never really have some of this information. But yeah, you can do your best to even just be able to say, I make it really simple because you get too complicated, it won't work. So I'm like, here's a ranking system: high, medium, low when it comes to your ICP. High is who you are solving the problem for. You made everything designed around this person. You spend your resources on them. They're perfect. They're unicorns. Medium is we don't go after them. They come to us. They are inbound leads. They are referrals. You still have to qualify them, but you don't go after them. And lows, I don't care if they said, I'm going to give you $1 million. you say no, right? So that's kind of the map. But when I show them the highs, I show them your cost of acquisition, your LTV, the amount of years that they want to renew with you, the expansion they've given to you naturally, the referrals they send you, right? You show the health and the revenue tied to those people. And then you show what it looks like when that $1 million customer was actually a negative $1.2 million because of what it cost you, right? And sometimes you have to give in qualitative costs, things like how upset and frustrated you all are as a company when you work with customers like this, right? How rude they are to you, right? How many meetings you've had wanting to tear your hair out, because sometimes I don't have enough data from them to be able to show them the amount of like hours and labor you paid these people to service this customer. But if I can, then I can literally show them. You think this looks big because of the money you booked on paper, but when we actually started servicing them as a customer, you lost money, right? So yes, that's a very important part, because to your point, you got to take the emotion out of it as best you can.
You have. The other way of taking the emotion out of it is that the commission is skewed to, your ideal customer, and the ones, once you've qualified them, well, you can go for this one, but this is your commission. This is how much money you're going to make from it. It's unprofitable to you personally. You won't want to do this. So this is the sweet spot, and you want your commission to stay really high. So that's where you want to be focused.
Yeah, use your compensation plans for more than just salespeople, right? Customer success, any performance-based role, right? You can, and that's where like things like spiffs are wonderful. It doesn't even have to be like in the whole comp plan overall. It could be like, we're really focused on making this cultural change. So for every high-ranked customer that we close, X spiff is going to happen per quarter, right? I mean, that's a really great point.
Yeah, great one. Great one. Okay. So your personal values, what are the ones that have influenced the way that you lead?
So I have a rule that I don't know when this got created, because I've been in sales leadership for over a decade now, but I would say, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Speak your language.
Okay. My rule was no assholes and no whiners on my team. And so what I meant was, because especially unfortunately in sales culture, you get a lot of jerks, right? You get a lot of selfish behavior because it can get really competitive. But I didn't tolerate that on my teams. And so you can't be a jerk. I don't care if you're the top seller. It's not allowed, right? Because we're just going to make sure the table's big enough for all of us instead of trying to shove people out. So that was one thing. And that just came a lot of how I was raised. It's just like, we don't tolerate that. Everybody is welcome to our table unless you're a jerk, and then you're not. So that was number one. And number two, I don't want you whining. Stop whining. Can't stand it. Super big pet peeve. I'm really patient, but if you want to whine about something and not actually try to do something about it, we're not going to have it. So if you need a vent session, vent away, right? I am your leader. I'm your coach. I'm your mentor. I'm your friend. Let's vent. Then let's do something about it, right? So one of my kind of ride or die AEs I've hired many times, he told me in the side after, someone was getting frustrated about something. And he went, look, I'm going to tell you something. Lindsay does not like it if you just want to complain. She will hear you out. She'll be really great about, anything that you need to talk about from an emotional standpoint, but you need to come with some idea or a potential solution to help fix it. Like, that's the key. And he told me that later, that he told this rep, and I went, oh, you're right. I don't like it when people do that. And it is good when someone comes, it doesn't have to be the right idea, but let's be problem solvers too. So those values, run through me deep in anywhere that I work. And it's it's how I parent too. So it's really there. And I just think that, we don't have to have the right answers, but we can just whine about it. Like, it's just not going to get us anywhere.
Yeah, there's another phrase that I used to, don't deal with tossers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Those types of mindsets and attitudes, they affect your whole, org and culture. And before I went off and ran my own business, my last full-time company, we actually had really strong values across the company itself. It's my favorite company I've ever worked for. But we decided as a sales org, we would make our own too. So they were kind of a subset. And so number one was the one I just mentioned. Number two is no bad eggs, right? And there was, and there was a few, because you need to cultivate, especially in startups and growth, right? Like it's not going to be rainbows and sunshine every day. It's going to be hard work. We're all here because we all want to succeed. So if you don't create a living, breathing set of values together to sometimes remind each other, that's not really aligned with our values right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what? You're right, right? And it's how you hire, it's how you promote around, right? And it's a big deal. So
I love it. I love it. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm going to put the link of your post in the notes, because I think it's one of those, as you say, it has so much life with it and resonates with so many people and our allies as well. I've loved talking to you about pipeline, and yeah. And some of the phrases, you reminded me of one, don't deal with tossers, but I love the phrases as well. So how can listeners get hold of you, Lindsay?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn. That is
Yeah.
where you can find me. And any other ways that you can find me, you could just find me, like I said, through LinkedIn.
No problem. So thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Lindsay Rios.
Thank you, Janice.
If you enjoy this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, explore other episodes of insightful guest conversations or watch the caption show on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with strategies to help you scale your sales. I love to hear your thoughts, so please share your views and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more revenue generators just like you. So until next time, keep scaling your sales.